Thank you so much, Kyle. And thank you everyone for being here and welcome to the second event of the Summer Inclusion Tour. Today's program is on decolonizing higher education. And this term, decolonization, is a controversial word in higher education in our educational systems. It carries the weight of unlearning Western ideologies and relearning ancestral knowledge systems, the weight of deconstructing systems that perpetuate oppression and stratification, and reconstructing those same systems with diverse talents, equitable practices, and inclusive spaces, and the heavy weight of undoing the blood-ridden foundation that paved paths of generational trauma and put in the work to repave a road that is prosperous for all. The role that the systems of higher education play in deconstruction process is vital to ending institutional racism and inequality amongst communities and people of color. The races against races must stop. Decolonizing higher education is for everyone, but there is absolutely no single way to approach decolonization because different communities require different support, strategies, and conversations. This is the job of the stakeholders within the institution that serves that community. That is the role of each and every person who works at Hudson County Community College. Who do we serve? What is their trauma? What type of support do they need? What strategies do we need to implement in order to help remove their barriers? As I conclude and hand the floor over to Jonathan Cabrera, an instructor of criminal justice at Hudson County Community College, I'm going to leave you with this question. What does decolonization look like at Hudson County Community College?
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everybody's good. Thanks so much for the intro. Thank you everybody for being here and for being present. So this concept of decolonization is of course a deep one. We only have so much time to run through it, but I plan on touching on different points that hopefully you guys can take away and at least give you a better understanding as to where we're at with things. So what I'm gonna do is share the screen and then we'll begin. So as mentioned, my name is Jonathan Cabrera. I'm an instructor at Hudson County Community College. For me, I'm passionate about this topic because I actually grew up similar to many of our students. I graduated from undergrad 2014, so I'm not that far removed from the modern day college experience. And I lived in Jersey City since I was a teenager up to like 22, 23. And I even went to Hudson for one semester in high school for an internship program. So I understand the dynamic, having been one of those students, now being on this side of the conversation. So before we get into any conversation around colonization or decolonization, we have to understand that poverty is part of this overall conversation, right? When we talk about what's going on with our students, a lot of them are coming from lower income housing or just, not the greatest socioeconomic situations. And the reality is for many minority communities, especially in the Black and Hispanic community, education is the way out. Just like the song said, I wrote my way out. Well, for this, for many of our students, education is the way out. Unfortunately, if it's not that, there's other alternatives, and whether it's through sports or through other things that may not necessarily be conducive to their overall well-being, the reality is that education is the way out of poverty. Not necessarily that all our students experience poverty, but it is a reality as far as, the link between what colonization has done to a certain group of people. And if anybody understands the effects of this, it would be Mahatma Gandhi. He said, poverty is the worst form of violence, right? Because when you don't have money, you can't eat, you can't have a house over your head. You're just gonna be struggling every day just to get by. So, and colonialism was not that far removed in the 20th century as far as Gandhi's personal experience. So if we look at the actual definition of what poverty means, the first definition says, the state of one who lacks a usual or socially acceptable amount of money or material possessions. Of course, that's subjective because to many people, money is whimsical, the concept of it, right? If I have $10, I'm gonna look at somebody who has $5 and be like, yo, you don't got no money. But somebody with $20 is gonna look at me with $10 and say, you ain't got no money. So of course it can be subjective, but overall we know that there is a caste system that exists, in society in general. But generally speaking, if you can eat, if you can wash your clothes, if you have a place to live, that's generally considered a socially acceptable amount. Now, again, before getting into the conversation of colonization, we have to understand this because the reason why we're looking to decolonize is because we want our students to be successful in college so that they can escape these statistics right here, so that they can escape potential poverty or continuing to live in poverty, if that's the case for them. So based on Statista, the highest population that experiences poverty in the US is the Black population, right after it, the Hispanic population, and then all other races follow right after that. It is defined as, poverty is defined as a single person in the US making less than $1,200 a year, and families of four making less than basically about $24,000 a year, which we know that that's nothing. That's probably a quarter of some of our salaries, or just a portion of it. So at the end of the day, we understand that these are realities that some of our students may be coming into college with, and it is our obligation to try and give them the best chance to escape that. So the conversation right here begins with, what is colonization? When we look at the actual definition, of course, there are various definitions, but the one I want to focus on is on number 3, to infiltrate with usually subversive militants for propaganda and strategy reasons. Now, the two main focuses here are propaganda and strategy reasons. But I also do like the fact that it says subversive. Subversive meaning under the radar, not out in the open, not obvious. They're kind of going around the circle, right? They're not coming at you directly. They're coming at you from around the border. And basically in doing so, instilling or implementing propaganda and different strategies and things of that nature. Now, when we think about a famous colonizer, you have Mr. Christopher Columbus. So just to give a little backdrop of who Mr. Columbus was, just to kind of refresh our memories, Columbus was looking for a direct route west from Europe to Asia. So that was his original motive. Now, what's interesting about him is that he gets all the credit when it comes to this grandiose idea. Oh, he discovered the Americas, this and that. But he wasn't the first person to propose that idea. Okay, so he just happens to be the person that ended up succeeding in implementing it, but that was an idea that had actually been revolving for some time. He came through with La Nina, La Pinta, Santa Maria. So he came through with his crew, hundreds of people, a lot of funding, resources, things of that nature. When he first landed over here in the Americas, he landed in Hispaniola, which is now Dominican Republic. The indigenous population at the time was in the millions. So there was a large population of Taino Indians and different tribes and things of that nature. By the time that he finished doing what he was doing, homicide, genocide, all that stuff, in attempting to take over the land, the population dropped down to basically, just about a quarter of what it used to be. Columbus, which is something that is not really focused on in regards to his life, was eventually arrested for some of his actions and things that he decided to do against the monarchs and things of that nature, and eventually was stripped of his titles. So even though he did go on other voyages, he didn't have that same glory that he had when he first landed in the Americas. So that's something to keep in mind. It all comes full circle in a sense. So going back to the definition of colonization, the two main focuses, propaganda and strategy. So if we're talking about what the propaganda was at that period in time, you had the 3 G's. You had God, gold, and glory. So as far as God, basically, there was this perception that, we need to convert this population because they're savages. They're not, they behave like beasts and animals rather than civilized humans, right? So hang with me for a little bit, right? Because in a sense, indirectly or subconsciously, that's kind of what some people might look at cultural differences as, oh, there's not a place for that here in higher ed, or there's not a place for that in the world in general. But we have to understand that the system that we do have in place in the United States it exists as a result of colonization. So of course, whoever implemented the system is going to also fast forward the mindset and the mentality that people assume. So of course, you have the conversion of the populations. You had the ascertainment of their wealth, their resources. So, even though it was deemed that his ventures for gold were pretty fruitless for the most part, compared to what he might have thought he was going to get, they did go in with the intent of getting wealthy and getting resources. And then, of course, the last one is glory, claims to superiority and prowess. Hey, we're the more dominant race or species or whatever. We're unmatched. So now that was the propaganda at that point. The strategy at that point was they entered an already inhabited land, rejected the culture and ways of the natives, forced European customs and ideas on them, and basically subjected natives to conditions that led to their demise. So of course that came in different forms, whether it was homicide, rape, things of that nature. Those were all things that eventually happened that diluted the overall population or brought the population down immensely. Now, how does this apply to higher ed in regards to the propaganda aspect of it? So if we take those 3 G's and we put quotes around them, what would God be for higher ed in this sense? So, okay, subjecting students to policies, right? So they, back in the day, subjected them to religion or certain ideologies and certain ways of being. That's basically in the sense what policy is. It's a way of thinking. It's a format on how to quote unquote live and proceed. So things such as latenesses, absences. I know that of course we always want to be cognizant that our students aren't violating these things, that they're not going over the top. But especially in the Hispanic Serving Institute, where there's certain realities that exist, like maybe lack of funds for transportation, or maybe family emergencies because a student lives in a family of 5 and something happened and et cetera, reevaluating these things, because one of the main questions is if a student misses a class here or a class there, but they're still keeping up with the work online and they're still reaching out, sending emails, things of that nature, how does that end up translating at the end of things, right? So not necessarily eradicating these specific examples altogether, but just saying, let's take a deeper look at this. Let's see if maybe we can expound on this and find better solutions rather than just saying 3 absences, that's it, you're done with the class. Traditional antiquated pedagogy. One thing about higher ed or just education in general is that there's not a lot of progression done. If you take a picture of what the classroom looks like in 1915 and you compare it to a classroom today, they almost pretty much look the same, but you can't do the same with a vehicle, you can't do the same with a building, right? So it's important to understand that the same way that the rest of society progresses, education has to progress as well. And there's just certain things that have to be left behind, and we have to grow out of certain ways of thinking. Example, maybe having textbooks and things of that nature, because now we got the internet, a lot of things are for free and more accessible. The gold concept. So at the end of the day, we have to be real with ourselves. Everybody that works in higher ed has a job because the students pay tuition. If there's no students, there's no professors, there's no administration, there's nothing, right? So at the end of the day, there is a prize to be got by working in this institute. Now, of course, a lot of people may not necessarily be as culturally sensitive as they need to be. And it could be directly or indirectly. It doesn't have to be on purpose, right? But when you, for example, provide a syllabus and nowhere on the syllabus, it shows anything that has to do with hip hop, let's say, or, maybe something within a certain community where the students are familiar with, or things of that nature. What you're basically indirectly telling the student is who you are outside of this classroom experience, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Even though you're paying us, And even though this is your money and we're providing you a service with the money that you paid us, your opinion doesn't matter. So those are things that need to be taken into consideration, because it doesn't have to be overt, but these are subliminal things that happen that, you know, students subconsciously process and understand. Okay, I don't have a, you know, my culture doesn't have a place in higher ed. You know, this is a sad reality. I think this is a very small minority, but not everyone is here for the students. Of course, some people just, they couldn't find another job, so they pulled up over here. You know, some people just want the check, etc. At the end of the day, that's a minority, but it is a reality. And then, of course, there's faculty that make money and get royalties off of imposing textbooks. So it's not that they necessarily need that textbook, but it's that that textbook has a little extra change in their pockets. And the last one is glory. So taking credit for work that may not necessarily be effective, that can look many different types of ways. And then, of course, claims of improvement when more can be done. So we shouldn't just be satisfied with accomplishing the bare minimum, the same way that our students shouldn't be satisfied with just passing. We want them to excel. We should be, if that's our standard for our students, we need to be on the same type of time, on the same wavelength, and try to see what we can do on our side to assist them. In regards to the strategy now, so that was the propaganda as far as present day higher ed. Strategy now, entering campus, already retaining a certain population of students. So if you're a new professor or a new admin, whatever school you go to, there's already a certain population there, similar to, you know, Mr. Columbus, right? Once you go in there, are you open to the culture of the students, or are you telling them, okay, you have to keep that out of the classroom and you have to follow X, Y, and Z? Again, indirectly or directly telling them your culture doesn't matter here. Imposing traditional pedagogy and ideas on them. So things such as tests, textbooks, attendance, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about tests and we'll talk about textbooks more in depthly, but I just put them here in the meantime. And then lack of diversity and representation in faculty and administration. So those are some ways that, you know, we need to focus on decolonizing. Once we hammer in on those points, it of course will clear up the landscape a little more, and then it'll assist our students in having a better probability of graduating and things of that nature. So how does this apply to higher ed? If we're talking about tests, the definition of a standardized test requires all test takers to answer the same question or a selection of questions from a common bank of questions. So the reason why I included standardized tests in this is because one of the biggest tests that somebody will ever take in their life is the SAT exams, right? Everybody coming out of high school has to take it. You know, of course, some people don't take it, but for the most part, students are going to take the exam regardless of where they end up. And this exam can oftentimes be the differentiation between going to a four-year school that they really want to go to or going to the community college. Now, of course, you'll always have students that, you know, they didn't know what they were going to do and they already figured out in advance, I'm just going to go to community college, and that's fine. But you also have a good amount of students that were very ambitious and said, I want to go, you know, to Stockton, I want to go to Rutgers, I want to go to Montclair, et cetera, et cetera. But my SAT scores were not up to par, so I ended up at Hudson, or I ended up wherever. The fact of the matter is, when we look at scores directly as it pertains to the SATs, the higher the scores, you can see that it was more representative of the white and the Asian population, but the lower the scores, you can see that the Black and the Latino population made up most of those percentiles. So every time that you provide a test, you have to ask the question, am I re-engaging in trauma? And it might seem like, wow, like, you know, that's not what I'm trying to do, but you don't have to do that. It's not something that you're looking to intentionally re-engage in, but when you hit that trigger, when you hit that switch, you remind the student, okay, I'm not at the place that I want to be because one test, you know. And what that ends up doing to some students is maybe it discourages them from studying. Maybe it makes them want to drop the class. Maybe it causes them to, you know, perform poorly because now they put so much effort in trying to study for the SATs and they didn't get to where they wanted to go. Now they're going to go through that frantic motion every time that they take a test in higher ed in general. So these are just some things to consider. It doesn't mean that you can't provide a test. It just means that there's avenues that perhaps you can take, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Although Hudson accepts students without SATs, there are students who struggle with the fact that scores determine what college they were going to go to. So pretty much Hudson might have just been that backup plan that they didn't really want, but at the end of the day had to accept. The other reality of test taking in today's culture is it's almost, in my opinion, completely ineffective, simply because of the fact that college today is not the same as college back in 1980 or 1990. A student today has to go to work. They have to do an internship. They have to do student government, still juggle 15 credits, still have family related stuff. And again, especially if it's a Hispanic serving institute, the dynamics in a Hispanic home are completely different than if you have two parents that all they do is work one job 9 to 5. You have a parent that's working 3 jobs. My mother, for example, when I was going to college, worked 3 jobs. My pops comes home, done, goes to sleep. Like, he don't talk to nobody. So it's one of those things where students already have so much on their plate that when they study for a test, they only do it maybe 24 hours in advance. And it's about memory retention. It's about cramming. So none of that information really becomes conducive for them or even beneficial at the end of the day, because by the time that they finish taking the test, they already forgot probably 90% of the material already. And then you have advances in physiology education showing that students listening to 15-minute lectures retain 41% of the material compared to 20% when they listen to 40-minute lectures. So the longer a lecture goes, the longer that a lesson goes, the less information they're going to retain. So if that's true for a lecture where they can at least dialogue and go back and forth, how much more true is that for an exam that literally all they're doing is looking at a piece of paper? So these are just some things we need to consider, because at the end of the day, yeah, you might be engaged in trauma through the SATs and things of that nature, but test-taking culture in general for college students is just, it's not even efficient, as far as I'm concerned, and even through my experiences. This is the other thing, as far as the SAT exams, it does have a racist origin. As the US absorbed millions of immigrants from Europe beginning in the 19th century, the day's leading social scientists, many of them white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, were concerned by the infiltration of non-whites into the nation's public schools. So the person that invented the SAT exams, his name was Carl Brigham. He was a psychology professor at Princeton. He also helped develop the aptitude test for the Army in World War I, which, if you have any background knowledge of it, at that time, Black soldiers were segregated from white soldiers, and those aptitude tests were made for that purpose, so that way it's not, directly stated, oh, you can't get with them because you're Black. Let's see how smart you are, and then that'll determine that. But of course, if they don't have the resources to study, by default, they're not going to end up where these soldiers are at because they didn't have the resources in the first place. So this was the individual that helped create the SAT. He said as one of his greatest contempts, he said the decline of American intelligence will be more rapid than the decline of the intelligence of European national groups owing to the presence here of the Negro. So Carl Brigham's concern at the time was there's a lot of European immigrants coming over here. Even though, yes, they're white in nature, the fact of the matter is they're not our type of white. Right, so they're going to dilute our overall intelligence here in the US, but even if that's the case, they don't do it at the same speed that the Black population does it. So this individual right here is the one that created the SAT exams, and that's basically some of its origins. Robert Yerkes, the president of the APA at that time, and also a professor at Harvard and later at Yale University, wrote in the foreword to Brigham's book, the author presents not theories or opinions, but facts. It behooves us to consider the reliability and their meaning, for no one of us as a citizen can afford to ignore the menace of race deterioration or the evident relations of immigration to national progress and welfare. So we can see that even just the trauma of not being able to pass an SAT exam or not pass, but get a high score, it's as a result of somebody's racist intent. Somebody deciding, hey, I don't want a certain group of people to enter Princeton, Harvard, even Rutgers or Montclair or whatever. I don't want this population to enter into these schools. Let's keep them over here so that way we're safe, so that way we don't have to deal with that. So as a result of all that, the SATs have now become like the standard, and that keeps our students in community colleges, but a lot of our students wish they could be at other colleges and they can't. So now we have to think about, are we re-engaging in trauma? Some proposed strategies that I do put out there, if you're gonna have tests, which I'm not against them completely, I don't do them, but if you're going to do them, I do suggest maybe consider open book exams. That way you can walk them through, hey, this is how you do an open book exam. We're going to focus on chapter 1, this, and this section. Some of the questions might be around this topic or that topic. Memorize that, take some notes, et cetera, et cetera. That way you're teaching the students how to study and how to basically retain that information a lot better and a lot more effectively. Because you can have an open book exam and, if you don't know where to look for the information, you're still going to end up failing. So you basically just have to walk the students through on how to test take, because a lot of them don't know how to take tests in general. Make quizzes open-ended. So instead of making it multiple choice, which, it could be easy depending on the questions, but it can also be a quick cop-out because a lot of students just want to get it out the way and they just circle whatever. You actually test their knowledge by making it open-ended. Okay, we talked about this in class. What are your thoughts on this? Provide a reflection, et cetera, et cetera. That way they're building out the communication skills, and it's something that, they actually gave serious thought to and consideration. And determine other alternatives that can be practical to their field of study. So me, at the end of the semester, I give my students a final paper and I make them do a presentation. The presentation, the purpose of it is, in the field of criminal justice, students are going to be talking. They're going to be speaking in front of crowds of people and things of that nature. They're very rarely going to take any quizzes, any exams. It's not practical for their field. So I would much rather for them gain a practical tool than something that they'll never really have to focus on outside of the classroom. Another thing that we could do is build up the diversity in the administration. So right here, we can see that as far as different positions, as far as admin goes, the majority of people that take up those positions are white. So if we're talking about provost, if we're talking about chief student financial aid officer, chief information officer, all the way down to chief athletics administrator, overwhelmingly white and by a stark margin, right? So at the end of the day, diversifying that so that there's more opportunity for students to see somebody in a position of influence. And even if it's not in the field that they want to do it in, at the very least, it's a visual. It's something that they can see and say, hey, it is possible somebody from my background to get up to this point. At the end of the day, students in this current culture and in our present day society are very visual. My battery's bugging out. In our current society, students are very visual, especially with social media, Instagram, things of that nature. They need to be able to see it to believe it. So if they can see somebody coming from their type of background or at least having some relatability to, it'll assist them in being able to move up and to improve, at least even just in the mentorship aspect of things, having somebody that can walk them through, coach them, things of that nature. Same thing as far as faculty is concerned. The overwhelming majority of faculty, full-time faculty, are white. So using Hudson as an example, if you're a white faculty member and you walk into a classroom that's predominantly Black and Hispanic, you can try to put your best foot forward and you can genuinely and sincerely care for the students, but there's going to be shortcomings, and that's just the reality of it, right? Obviously, you're always going to strive to try to make the best effort to understand, but you only have so many weeks in a semester. You know, certain things have to already be known before you even get into that classroom, because sometimes time is of the essence. So it's important to have that at least balance. Not that everybody has to be Black and Hispanic, because it's good to have diversity in general, but we just need to see more of a balance. And again, the importance of it is, you know, you want to have that balance, you know, which ultimately affects the dynamics around policies and resources and programs and things of that nature. Colleges should focus on recruitment and promotion of qualified candidates of color. It's an unfortunate reality, but in a lot of cases, some of these candidates, I would even argue, are overqualified, because now they have to, you know, substantiate even harder, because they have to prove without a shadow of a doubt, I qualify for this position, you know, and my name, whatever my name is, Cabrera, whatever, that's not going to mean anything. You know, whatever stereotype you have of Hispanic or whatever, it's not going to mean anything. It's not diversity for diversity's sake. It's basically whoever comes from this background, they already come with that knowledge. You don't have to train them. You don't have to spend money and resourcing on programs and things of that nature. They already understand what's going on. And again, students can envision themselves in similar roles and be more proactive in mentorship opportunities, which is always important. And then, of course, the other thing is textbooks. Despite growing online markets for discounted books, the average cost of college textbooks has risen 4 times faster than the rate of inflation over the past 10 years. That has caused 65% of students to skip buying required textbooks at some point because of lack of affordability. So you have 65% of students skipping out on buying textbooks. What's going to be the end result of that? They're not going to do good in the class. So ultimately, if your goal is for your students to succeed and to pass, but they're not buying textbooks because you're making them buy textbooks, it's kind of just, it's like hitting your head against a wall. You're going to go nowhere, right? So ultimately, even the pricing of it is just even higher than the rate of inflation. The average student, in the course of a year, they spend $1,200 on books and materials, according to the College Board. $1,200, that's rent right there. That's money that they could be using for transportation. That's money that they could be using for food or a babysitter or whatever, you know, but instead they're using it in the book that they're probably never going to use again. You know, so it's important for us to understand that textbooks can be burdensome physically as well, right? Imagine walking around with a textbook all day when you just came back from work, like it's tiring. There's new avenues that we can explore that don't have to necessarily be that. Going back even to the poverty conversation, education is a form of getting out of poverty, but at the end of the day, you can get out of it through education, but you find yourself in new situations, right? Throughout the years, the cost of tuition has increased dramatically, but salaries have not. They've remained fairly the same for the most part. By the time that a student finishes college 12 years after, a Black student has a much more difficult time paying off debt than a white student. So, okay, you got out of whatever environment you're from, you graduated college, amazing, excellent. Oh, wow, now I got all this debt, you know, because I didn't have generational wealth. I didn't have, you know, that financial backing, you know, because of parents that were able to provide and they had already a decent paying job and things of that nature. So they leave one situation to find themselves in another situation. A lot of these loans and the debt that they took on is for the textbooks. So at the end, if we want them to be successful in life in general, these are some ways that we can try to offset the burden so that way it doesn't become so difficult for them. The proposed solution, OER, is open educational resources. The benefits of it is free for students. Right off the rip, you build rapport with them. I can't tell you how many times I start off the classroom and I say, yo, this class has no textbooks. Oh, for real? Oh my God. You know, and like everybody's just like amped up and excited. You build automatic rapport with them. You can become their best friend just like that, just by the fact that you're not telling them to buy textbooks. So that's very helpful for both sides in that respect. Because now they look at you from a different lens and they want, in my experience, want to do the work even more because it's a lot easier to access. There's funding and paid opportunities. You know, one thing I do propose for colleges to do, even though of course you should want to do it from your own inner parts and beings, colleges should definitely provide a program, provide maybe some incentives, a stipend, something of that nature to build out OERs, at least in, you know, in the beginning stages, so that way students can move forward, and educators can move forward in building these things out. There are OER conferences as well, where one can present, which of course builds up your resume, and you can also be, you know, assisted by those conferences. And at the end of the day, once you build an OER, these are reusable materials. You can, you know, continually update them. You can add, you can take away, but it's very easy to use. Students can just pull it up on their phone, and it's easy for everybody to continue from there. And my proposed ways of decolonizing, if you're in the classroom or just even in college in general, like as an admin, what have you, programs, syllabuses, et cetera, focus on including documentaries, movies, music. Like hip hop right now is the most trending genre out of everything. Students are very big on Netflix. Maybe if you're teaching a class on music, pull up a Netflix documentary, something that they can continue to watch at home for free because they already got that, right? Options, choices. I give my students 10 reflections that they need to do by the end of the semester. I teach over 20 topics by the time that we get the presentations, but I tell them, look, just pick 10 of those. You can do a reflection on any of those topics. As long as I get 10 reflections by the end of the semester, I'm good. So you're basically empowering them and you're teaching them to take control over their own educational experiences, where otherwise they might not have explored many options because it was, I either do this or I just end up being in the bad position. Take them out to trips, outside events, programs on campus. So if you have the opportunity to, instead of having a class, bringing them over to the auditorium, you know, to watch a presentation or whatever's happening, expose them, do that for them. They'll remember it and they'll appreciate you for it. Be open to extra credit, late assignments. This is in baseball, you would say this is like the farm system, right? This is the minor leagues in a sense for them. This is where you get the chance to get your mistakes out the way so that when you go into the big leagues, when you get into the real world, you're not making so many mistakes. So be lenient, be open, you know, be understanding. Even if they are making a crazy excuse, if they're showing you that they want to do the work, why would I want to stop that? You know, why would I want to disincentivize that? You know, we already spoke about policy changes and diversification and things of that nature. And just to kind of cap it off, here's an example of how students have gotten creative in my classroom. So for presentations, I'll tell them, look, you can do a presentation, you know, like a PowerPoint, you could do a documentary if you want, you could do a performance, you know, a poem, whatever you want, whatever you think that you can do to get the message across of your final paper, you do it. I had a student create a Jeopardy game, and it was about wrongful convictions and reentry. And basically, it's a whole board over here. If you click on, let's say, punishment for $200 or number 200, it will give you a question. Name the 5 individuals who served 10 plus years for rape and attempted murder, but were all found innocent. And then right there, you got the Central Park 5. And on the bottom right-hand corner, you have a house. If you click on that house, it takes you right back to this right here. Some other ideas, our iPhone project, you know, if something is trending, and for example, for me in criminal justice, a lot of these things just come easy because it's like all these things have been criminal justice related. I would say go on Instagram and search hashtag George Floyd, hashtag social justice, and write a reflection on that. What do you see is happening on your timeline or on your feed, right? Or maybe follow a page, share something. What do you think is going to be informative for you as far as the material that we go through in the class, and things of that nature? And maybe even using some hip hop lyrics. So, you know, this is an example of maybe using some Tupac Shakur lyrics, kind of talking about what happens in the inner cities and things of that nature. And that's always going to be of interest for the students. So basically, just to kind of cap it off, you have to be proactive with all these actions, right? It's not enough just not being racist anymore. It's not enough just saying, oh, I can live amicably amongst certain groups of people and etc. But I'm just not going to really get involved like that. It's not enough to just do that anymore. You have to actually take that action. And anytime you have the opportunity to be anti-racism, anti-colonialism, anti-whatever, you have to be proactive in that because it shows the intent. And the intent is always going to come out. The students, whether you know it or not, are some of the best assessors of a person's character because they're young. They're young for the most part. So the youth are not going to lie to you for the most part. And two reflection questions I have just to kind of cap it off. Do you think these proposals are difficult to build off of? And the second one is, are you open to building out OERs? So I'm gonna unshare the screen real quick. I appreciate y'all sitting in and listening to the presentation, but I'm gonna ask the first question again, and whoever wants to jump in, feel free to jump in. So the first question is, do you guys think these proposals are difficult to build off of? That's right, Doreen, Netflix for life.
Hi, Jonathan. So first, amazing presentation. Thank you so much. Very informative. Do I think it is difficult to implement? No. The implementation perhaps is not the difficult part. I think the efficacy, the time, desire perhaps is what is needed in order to implement the self-education that is required, within that implementation. But do I think it's difficult? Not necessarily. I think to a certain extent it is our jobs as educators to look into the curriculum, to diversify it, to decolonize it. And to be clear, decolonization is not removing all of Western education. It is, bringing in multiple knowledge systems. So what we discussed last week, bringing in indigenous knowledges and so forth. So, from my perspective, no. From your perspective, no. But I think from a larger perspective, the word is so scary. Decolonization, reconstruction. It's so abstract, it's so large. How do we really tackle it? And I think that you did a really great job of breaking it down and making it tangible. So thank you.
Well, for sure, I appreciate that. What are some other thoughts? You guys think that that this is something that you guys can build off of? Is there difficulties that you guys see? Maybe having difficulty with technology, or that we can be real here. Maybe just not having that understanding of other cultures because you're not part of that culture. You wasn't born into a Black home or Hispanic home or what have you. So, what are some of the difficulties you guys feel you can probably receive assistance with to kind of just air it out?
Hi, I hope you guys can hear me well. There's like construction. My name is Leslie. It's nice to be here. I think that Natalia, she said it perfectly in one word. It's scary. And I think that is why there's so much disbelief in the first place, why it's hard to get the desire from everyone to come and work together to find solutions. And I think that it's very possible. I don't think it's impossible at all. But I think that the hardest part would be to get rid of the fear of from everyone to get to include everyone into education and the concept of reaching higher education. And I think that probably for me as a student, I feel like the hardest thing that I've gone through as a student is actually talking to people that are in higher education. I haven't even reached out to a dean until like this last week, and I'm a sophomore, so this is like my 4th semester. And I don't know why, but I guess it's like that's the thing, is that I know in Hudson County there's a lot of amazing staff, so it's not that I wouldn't trust them or something. It's more just, I guess, the fear, and like already having all of those all of those bad experiences and trauma in the past, that I'm like, oh, I don't want that to happen. But like, I'm really happy with everything that I've experienced in Hudson County, which I'm very grateful for. Like, this was really like the perfect community college experience, basically. But yeah, I hope that we can all like find some really great solutions. I think we can do it.
No, most def, and your input is just as important as anybody else's. We're here to serve as you. You know, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, if the students ain't in the college, we ain't got no jobs. You know, so it's one of those things where we need y'all to be just as involved in the process as much as anybody else. Y'all have a powerful voice, and I tell my students this all the time. When you pull up to a fast food spot or a restaurant or whatever, if they don't give you what you're asking for, what are you gonna do? You're gonna be like, yo, this my suit, you know, like I need a new suit. So why are we not doing that as far as, you know, our demands for higher ed? You guys are paying tuition, right? You guys are going in debt, a debt that you're not gonna be able to pay off for years and years. You guys are you're providing literally lifetime sacrifices for education. Why should you not be able to speak and share where your concerns are in regards to higher ed? You know, so I definitely encourage y'all, like, stay involved, stay in the loop, you know, chop it up with different people, whoever you think that is going to be beneficial to you for your growth, for your empowerment. Get close to them, grab them, be like, yo, I pay your salary. I need you to take care of me a little bit, you know, like just keep it real with them a little bit, because especially in minority communities, like finding role models is a very difficult thing. You know, it's a very difficult reality. I'm speaking from experience. Like, I mean, I grew up with both of my parents, but not really, you know, because they was always working. So whatever I learned from the dudes on the streets or whatever. So it's like, you have to always give yourself the chance to do better. So I see a couple of hands raised. Natalia, we could take these, right?
One moment. I want to piggyback really quick, and then Mark, we're gonna hand it over to you. So Leslie, thank you for speaking up, and this is something that we hear a lot, actually, and this is that concern, the authority, the fear of speaking up to authority figures. I'm gonna quote that, and it's not to say that other individuals aren't in that position, but it perpetuates a system of stratification that is was imposed on from Western colonialism, right? Certain individuals are on top, certain individuals are on the bottom, when in reality, we are here to serve you. Exactly what Professor Cabrera said. We're here to serve you. And so when you come in with that mindset, we are all on the same level. We're all equal. And so never feel fear to speak up. My mother raised me that no one is above you, no one is below you. We are always side by side. And that concept has made me personally successful in my career. So I hand that over to you. Take that, internalize it, and never fear that fear. So Mark, we're gonna hand it over to you. Munoz?
Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. I almost didn't come, and I'm glad that I did, but yeah, I connected a lot to what you guys said, and to starting with you, Mr. Professor Cabrera, your professor, and never had you. I wish I did. But yeah, so I actually been through a lot. You know, I'm Hispanic. I don't know if you guys can tell. I had really horrible SAT scores. I definitely had some financial issues, you know. I've changed a lot throughout my journey, as I can imagine you have too, Jonathan. So yeah, I know that me and you definitely are the type of person to speak out. I wasn't that type of person. I'm 26 now, so it took me a while to actually get into the groove of education, especially when you know, you have to go through financial aid, and especially nowadays, the coronavirus can probably deter some people from going to school. So I'm rambling a lot at this point, but I've been through so much, and I'm just so glad that you guys are speaking up for the minorities, and you know, just anybody in general who's just going through a lot with, you know, with teachers, you know, not having that connection with the students, especially nowadays. Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that, you know, we're working towards it. You know, now I'm in a workforce development program. Like, I'm reaching outside school, because sometimes you can't even, you know, rely on. I wish sometimes I can talk to students, because I've been through so much and I can actually help them. I see my friends going through things and I'm like, bro, it's easy. You know, you just got to email, you know, you got to work on your email etiquette. You know, these are things that's, you know, school doesn't even teach you, you know, to have a professional way of conversing. You know, some people don't take you serious. And yeah, I'm sorry. I have so much to like that I wanted to say, and like I wanted to piggyback off of you guys, but I'll just leave it there. And thank you for, you know, speaking up for everybody, I guess. I appreciate it.
No, we appreciate you. And I mean, look, you can definitely get involved. You know, when I was a student in college, my way of getting involved was student government. You know, if there's ways that you can volunteer or maybe be a assistant in the department or things of that nature, you have to go out and look for it. The same way that our goal is, or the goal of this presentation is for faculty and admins to be proactive in decolonizing. We want students to also be proactive in implementing yourselves in these systems. You know, at the end of the day, it's important for us to all work together. You know, this is a partnership. It's not one of those things where one person's higher than the other. We're both working together to make this perfect blend of what it's like to have, you know, a diverse campus and a unified campus. So, you know, my encouragement to you is stay involved. You know, you want to help out people. You got the knowledge. You got you got the heart. The only thing stopping you is taking that first step and you going out there and doing it. But wherever you're at, always take that mentality with you. Let me get involved. Let me see how I can be, you know, a participant in this overall process, because that's how it started for me. And I graduated from NGCU 2014. Now in 2021, I'm an instructor at Hudson Community College. You know what I'm saying? So it all comes full circle. It all finds its way back, you know. And just like in the song in the beginning, wrote my way out. You gotta make it happen, or else nothing is gonna happen after that.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. I was just gonna say one more thing. I'm sorry. I remember taking the SATs and I forgot my calculator, and I know that based my whole life on that one mistake. And it just, getting everybody more prepared is definitely one of the biggest points, because I know that I'm glad I didn't give up. You know, I remember that day that I still had to take the SATs without having it. And I was proud of myself for scoring such an okay grade without having the things I needed. But I just wish, I guess, I had that little push of reminding me and just being there, having people behind me. But I guess we're here now. Now we have each other's backs.
yeah, just be proactive. Whoever you want to support you, be proactive. Be direct with them. Let them know your intent. Hey, I would like for you to, you know, like, is it okay if we go out for coffee sometime or whatever, and, you know, maybe build a relationship, build a rapport, and I want to pick your mind on these different aspects. Is that okay with you? You know, and you can't be afraid of rejection. You can't be afraid of failure. You know, all the greats fail. I look at Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest boxers of all time, if not the greatest, and he got losses. You know, so you have to basically put yourself out there and not be afraid of failure, because you learn more from those failures than you do from the successes. That's just a fact.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. GR, you want to unmute?
Yes, hello. First and foremost, Jonathan, thank you so much for this presentation. Like Mark, I almost didn't make it. I made it. Earlier, you spoke about You know, when we were talking, when this conversation began about the difficulties of creating, or the perceived difficulties of creating an OER curriculum. And, you know, one thing that I just want to throw out into the ether is my concern when it comes to the possibilities of creating OER curricula is, as you said, you know, certain professors not being part of a culture and having to learn, or I'm concerned about, you know, privileged faculty members, you know, for example, wanting to, let's say, building an OER curriculum and then leaning on marginalized people with that cultural know-how. And then, of course, because of the way that higher education is just set up, taking their ideas and basically taking credit for something, for, you know, ideas that did not come out of their head. Obviously, I don't expect anyone present right now to have solutions to that, but that's just something I wanted to throw out, has food for thought for people. Also, you know, how do you navigate building OER curriculum in a way that marginalized folks are given credit for their contribution?
No, that's valid. When you're saying the marginalized population receiving credit, are you talking about the people that created the specific resource that's now in the syllabus? So like if somebody took this over here and put in the syllabus and didn't give this person credit, that's what you're referring to?
Okay. Let me give you a more specific example. So let's say we have a white professor, white cisgender heterosexual professor. Oh, hey, I want to create, and let's say they're in the criminal justice program just like you, and they want to incorporate maybe some of the latest news articles pertaining to high profile cases against victims of police brutality or whatever. And I'm just going to put it out there. Most white folks don't really know, or they're not very familiar with media that's created by minorities for minorities. So like The Root, The Griot, Blavity. You know, I identify as Black, so obviously those are media outlets that I'm familiar with. Most white people probably wouldn't even know what the hell I just listed. And let's say they ask, you know, a Black colleague for some input. Black colleague gives them, you know, a couple of resources to follow through, maybe some links. And then, you know, when the curriculum is nice and finished, white professor slaps their name on it. It goes on the course schedule, and guess whose name is on it? I guess that's where my concern comes from. Or also too, you know, a professor may ask their students for resources as well. I remember when I was in undergrad, this was also pretty somewhat common. And once again, it's like whose name is slapped on at, you know, at the end. When it comes to like research studies, especially scientific ones, you see multiple names listed for a study. But when it comes to the creation, course creation, you know, I think that's a much more radical idea. It's like, oh, like listing multiple people for the creation of a syllabus? Yeah, why not?
Right. No, and that's a valid point. I mean, it's a very nuanced situation. It's something that, of course, whoever participated in the creation of that syllabus should receive credit. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. I mean, you know, everything is going to have its pros and cons, right? Like that's just the reality of life sometimes. And sometimes you wouldn't even find out until way after the fact that that was the case. The main focus as far as this presentation with the OERs, it was just more, let's just get them out there, you know? So unfortunately, yes, there's going to be professors that You know, they may just take the information, not give credit, et cetera, et cetera. You know, at least list the names on the syllabus, right? Like, or such and such, like at least put in parentheses with the assistance of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the main focus, and it's not to sound, you know, like kind of like morbid, but as long as the OER is out there, the main focus would be the students. You know, like as long as the students are getting what they need. Unfortunately, if that's a small, I'm not saying it's a small loss, but if that's a loss that occurs in the process of being able to help the greater good, which is the student population to get, you know, free access to education and curriculum, I would personally still take that. Of course, if we can, you know, cover everything, you know, the credit aspect of it, as well as the, you know, the students receiving free education, you know, or receiving free educational resources. I mean, that's best case scenario, and I would always want that. But even if that doesn't happen, I'm at least able to still look at that situation and say, okay, there's a shortcoming here, but at the very least, the majority of our students are receiving free resources, you know, so that's it. Of course, we should always give credit, but unfortunately, that's a bigger problem or a bigger issue than I think that, you know, that will have to be its own conversation in essence. But I definitely hear you.
Can I jump in a little bit? I think that speaks to integrity, and it speaks to an individual's integrity. And I think that as an individual, it is a concern, but it is not perhaps your concern, because it speaks to the other individual. And I kind of think that we just have to somewhat leave it out there, because leave it at that, and just you know, move on with our lives. Like, because at the end of the day, like Jonathan said, it's about the student. OER is about the student having access. A lot of our information that's on the internet, it is free to access, and it should be. You know, like no one, unless it's your own research, then yeah, obviously we have to give credit. But we in a scholarly environment, we should be sharing knowledge. That's the purpose of academia, shared knowledge. You know, and we should be sharing in these spaces. So if I offer something to you, like for Jonathan's presentation, you know, there's a lot of things I might pull from my own curriculum, you know, and I might not say like, hey, you know, Jonathan gave me the, I might not, or I might, you know. I know that I've Kenny Fabara, he's a wonderful example. He has so many beautiful things in his curriculum that I choose to, you know, pull some things out, and I'll ask him like, hey, can you help me with this? And in that moment, I might not give him credit, or I might give him credit. But I think that, you know, the shared knowledge, I think we kind of have to get over our ego, perhaps. And I'm speaking to myself as well, because I've been in this situation a lot as well. Like, hey, you didn't give me credit, but that's my ego speaking. So when we can get over that, and we can get back to our scholarly relationship and, you know, collaborative relationships with each other, I think that is the space that we need to try and remain in. Not to say that, not to you know, remove from the argument, though. It is definitely valid, and we should be giving credit to each individual. That speaks to integrity. Doreen, you've had your hand up for the longest time.
That's okay, I understand. I'm just listening and writing notes down. Professor, you're a wonderful speaker. You should be speaking to your colleagues and I guess teaching them all of these wonderful, I call it teaching out of the box techniques of engaging students and understanding where students come from, and being that person who came from that area. So I think that makes a difference, because you're a role model, a mentor, and an inspiration, and an example. And those are wonderful qualities. I wrote down notes because my little ADHD brain was zapping throughout the whole proposal. And as you could see, I was filling up your chat with things that were coming through my mind. But I guess I want to touch on two things. One is I really do think some professors need to get the experiencing of learning how to teach out of the parameters of what they're used to. And I think that's a really scary role for a lot of professors that have been teaching their way for a long time. But it is not addressing the needs of the students nor the barriers that impact their success. And there are so many barriers, their culture, their family, where they came from, not having the experience of even understanding or attending college. My parents did not go to school. My mom maybe had a 5th grade education. She was from Mexico. So like when she came here, she wasn't educated. When I decided to go to college, I went to community college, not at Hudson, I went to Bergen. And it was still a very overwhelming process. I can remember that, trying to figure out like what classes to take. And, you know, I remember just taking classes because I loved learning at that point. But it was really costly. Like, and that's what I'm hearing from students is they want more traditional guidance on what classes they should be taking and someone to help them make those choices and being active in supporting them and understanding where they're coming from. I had a student recently, and I'm going to jump off a topic. She spoke to me recently and she said in session, her professor started raising his voice and he got upset with her. And she got scared and she disconnected. And he failed her, but he failed to recognize that him raising his voice traumatized her. And we have to recognize that students come with multiple traumas that influence how they perceive safety in situations. So I guess what I'm saying is, from a standpoint of a professional, we need to educate our colleagues, our professors, on who their students are and how their students' learning and experiences impact their success. So I would love to, I guess, what Dr. Reber is always saying is ELFing our campus. I really believe wholeheartedly that would make the transition more helpful for the students. And again, teaching out of box, kudos to you. Honestly, I was amazed at how much you were talking and how you change your teaching styles to meet the students where they're at. As a therapist, we're always told we got to meet our patients where we're at. So you're meeting your students at where you're at. You're an awesome teacher. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And that's very humbling words. A lot of it comes down to just the person. It comes down to the individual. At the end of the day, before you put on that vest, that suit, whatever you go to work with, before you put on that title, who are you? You know, who are you as an individual? Are you an egocentric person? Are you a selfless person? Are you somebody that is willing to go out the way for other people, and especially for the people that, not for nothing, are taking care of your livelihood, you know? And so that really comes down to just the person. There's only so much of this that one can do, because if the individual has already fixated themselves on who they want to be for however long they want to be that person, it's going to be very difficult for these things to reflect somebody like that. But of course, if you're open to these things and you develop that understanding and that humility, hey, you know, yeah, there's validity in the things that we're talking about right now, then you will make those adjustments, right? Somebody that has maintained the same curriculum for an extended period of time. I mean, look, I'm a big sports fan, and sports is something that you take lightly, but these athletes look at it like if they're performing surgery. Or how can I cut the base better so I can get to second base faster? How can I make the throw even shorter so that I can get the guy out at home? It's the same thing in education. It's the same thing in whatever field you're in. How can I do this better? You know, so that by the time I get to 20 years in the job, let's say a barber, he cuts your hair in 15 minutes, but it looks good. Hey, no, you didn't take long enough, you know, cutting my hair, but your hair looks good though, right? I spent 20 years perfecting this craft. So it's the same thing. We have to always be sharpening and honing our skills, our blade, so that way, whatever we're doing, it's direct, it cuts, and it does what it needs to do, you know. And OER, I think, is, to me, the you know, it's a big standard of that aspect of a person. You know, if you really want your students to be successful in life, why would you not do OER? You know, it's something that ultimately, it's like textbooks in essence are kind of a shortcut. You know, you're kind of cutting a corner, and it's easy to say, okay, here's a textbook because you're already familiar with it. It takes more work to develop a curriculum from scratch and then always go back and refine it. So, I mean, I just challenge people. I challenge people to just be open to this. Not saying that just because you don't have a OER, that makes you a selfish person or anything like that, because that's not the case. Perhaps there's just, you know, you need the support, you need the help. How do I develop the OER? How do I, you know, have the conversation to even begin an OER? And that's what we're here for, you know. If I can be of assistance to anybody, I'm gonna drop my email right here so that you guys can always reach out. Because at the end of the day, you know, we all got to start. That's just the point. You know, we all start somewhere. We got to build up from there.
Hi, Lisa, you can unmute.
Hi, you didn't think you could get away with the session without me opening my mouth, did you? I just want to say, yes, thank you. This was really a wonderful way to look at things that, you know, I need to shift my perspective. I think that I keep working on shifting my perspective, but I also want you to know that as a librarian, I don't want to say I hold the key, but please utilize us in the library. We know where to go get the OER resources. We know where to go to get articles that we have in our databases that you can include in your courses. They can be embedded into Canvas. You can make copies of them. You can do so much. We have streaming media that you can ask the student, you know, please, we need you to watch a film over the next week. Well, here we have it. You don't have to go spend a nickel. You use your Hudson ID and you're in the door. And, you know, I don't mean in the door that way, but virtually it's all off campus. So, you know, please, the students and you guys, we really have so many resources, and we ourselves, I'm gonna, you know, do a little infomercial on us. We want to help everybody do the best they can, and we can help people at least begin, you know, a professor to find resources specific to putting, together a syllabus that more closely reflects what you want it to reflect, and that has the you know, different materials. And it's, yeah, the cost of textbooks is out of hand, way out of hand. And
Go ahead.
so really, I mean, we have people trained in OER, we have people that know a lot about OER. We're here.
Most definitely. Everybody take advantage of Lisa as a resource. She got the keys. She has the keys. And those textbooks, I have literally a whole drawer, like literally the same height as me, of all those textbooks that I got from undergrad and graduate school, just like literally sitting there collecting dust. I can't even resell them because they're already from like 2014 or whatever year it was from, like they're outdated. So like they depreciated as soon as I got them. If I didn't sell it within 6 months, even for like a third of the price, I'm never getting nothing back from it. It's worse than the car. At least the car I can still sell.
You're right about the textbooks. And actually I just initiated a weeding process. That's library speak for getting books out of the library that are, you know, and materials that are no longer relevant. And so we just started up at North Hudson, and, you know, we spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on these resources so that students can borrow them. But it's also amazing how quickly some of that information becomes outdated and irrelevant, and actually can do harm by giving students the wrong information or a perspective that's very outdated and can be, you know, you've talked about trauma and can add to some of that upsetment and trauma. So thank you. I'm going to stop talking now.
Natalia, you could love your textbooks, but I don't love mine. That's all.
I gotta push back. It's 3:17. We're gonna wrap up really quick. But I love my textbooks, and I do comparative inquiry, so that's my research. So when I look at my antiquated old 13-year-old textbooks, and I compare it to now, you can see the re-narrativization of the history of the literature, and I find it intriguing. But that's just my own, I'm weird like that. But if you're throwing out books, send them my way. Don't throw out books. Thank you all. It's 3:17. If anybody else has anything else that they would like to add, speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, we're going to close out, and we just look forward to you all continuing to travel along with us on a summer inclusion tour every Thursday at 2:00 p.m.
And definitely appreciate everybody who came out. Y'all are the real MVPs because y'all didn't have to come out, and y'all chose to come out and still stay 17, 20 minutes after. So salute to everybody here.
Thank you so much.
Jonathan, thank you so much. Really some great information and insight. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you both.
And come bother us in the library. We want to help everybody. That's our job.
And Mark, go join some activities. As a college student, I felt old and not like my peers because I was an adult student. I regret not getting involved. Get involved, connect with everybody.
And Mark, there's also opportunities as a work study student. I just put out a posting to hire part-time tutors. If you got straight A's, in a subject, I don't want to say straight A's across the board, but if you have a nice GPA, or, I can also, I'm going to put my email in here. I can also help you get in contact with an individual who is looking for a job on campus, if that's something that you are interested in.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Right now, well, like I said before, I'm in a workforce development program. So I'm doing like 5 days in the program, and I have school and I work. So you can imagine how much I'm doing. I can't even go to the library to get it 3D printed. I wanted that so bad. No, but I will definitely have your email if I have any time, and thank you.
All right, not only for that, I also oversee academic support services on the North Hudson campus. So if you need tutoring, if you need assistance, you can always reach out to me or to Doreen, any one of us, any service.
Mark, I'm more flexible than everyone. I am the director of mental health counseling. My staff, myself, we do weekend hours, evening hours. The advantage of being home right now has been that I can get up at 7 in the morning if I need to, or I could do a asking reminder to take care of yourself as well. Okay.
Let me just write this down before you close down the.
No problem.
Where's the?
Professor, you're wonderful. I'm going to tell all my students to take you.
I appreciate it. Hey, I won't be mad at that. I'll make sure that I could definitely plug you back and make sure that, if they need to talk to anybody, that they know who to talk to.
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
I have to run. Can you take over and close out?
Sure.
I gotta go. My session's starting. Mark, I look forward to hearing from you. Give yourself some pats on your back and do good self-care management.
Always.
Okay?
Thank you very much, Doreen. Thank you, everyone.
Professor, you're wonderful. Natalia, as always, it's wonderful to attend any of your events.
Thank you so
I'll
much
talk
for
with you
coming.
soon.
Mark, did you get all of the information in the chat? Yes?
Yep.
Oh,
Yes.
sound good. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Jonathan, thank you. We'll be in touch, okay?
Definitely.
Thank
Kyle?
you guys so much.